if you want it different, if you want to live in more peaceful, compassionate societies, communities, families, whatever it may be, what are you going to do?
Coming up on British thought leaders, Barry and Margaret Mizen, whose son was killed in a violent attack, talk about forgiveness and positive change.
If we look upon it as something primarily what we do for ourselves, it enables us to cope. It's enabled us to cope. It's enabled us to do what we do now.
They share personal experience of the damage caused by drill music.
But I think the music needs to be looked at anyway, because the words in this kind of music is inciting violence. It's inciting people to use knives, to use drugs. Well, this can't be right. And it has been a shock to us.
And say big changes are needed to stop young people falling into a life of violence.
Doing things like banning machetes is pointless. It's almost tokenism. You're going to ban the sale of that knife or that particular product. Go to the kitchen drawer. You know, it's almost as though if we ban a particular product, the problem will go away. No, it won't. You know, so I think we need some perhaps grown-up responses to some of this, especially from our political leaders.
Welcome to British Thought Leaders. I'm Lee Hall. Today I'm sitting down with Barry and Margaret Mizen of the Mizen Foundation. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So you started the foundation after your son Jimmy Mizen was murdered in 2008. Can you talk us through what happened?
Okay, well, we're the parents of Jimmy Mizen. Unfortunately, our son was murdered in 2008. Totally unprovoked attack just around the corner from where we live. Day after our son Jimmy's 16th birthday. Huge impacts on the family, as you can imagine. But there was a determination from the beginning. We're not going to be beaten, and something good will come from it. If at all, in any way, something good will come from it. And I'd like to say that we haven't been beaten in all these years, and we believe something good has and is coming from that situation.
Jimmy actually went into a bakery with his brother, and before he knew it, another person came in and threw a glass dish at Jimmy, and it shattered on his neck, and a piece of glass went through his carotid artery and his jugular vein, and Jimmy bled to death within 3 minutes. So this beautiful boy went out one day and didn't come home again.
What kind of person was Jimmy?
Oh, Jimmy was just a joy to his family, to all of us. We only realised after he'd died that in all of his 16 years and 1 day we hadn't had to tell him off. He loved life, loved his friends, loved his family, wanted to be like all his brothers, because we've got a large family. We've got 9 children. And Jimmy was just a pleasure to be around. He used to light up the room when he came in. A simple person, no high expectations. He just, as I say, just loved his family and wanted to be like all his brothers. Sad loss to us all, actually.
Yeah, I think Jimmy could relate to people. Don't know what the age is. He's come from the company of older people, younger people. Lovely disposition about him. I had a little business in those days, and Jimmy used to work with me on a Saturday. Lovely relationship with Jimmy. I'm a boring old dad with lots of silly stories, which I think are funny. And my son's, "Oh, Dad, it's not funny, we've heard it before." Jimmy would always laugh. Lovely relationship with him. And I kind of obviously missed him from the very beginning, my little mate. When
I go into schools, I usually share a little bit about Jimmy's character. And it was more about how he used to help people. A few days after Jimmy was killed, we went round to look at all the flowers that had been laid. And when we got there was an old carpet there. And I kind of got indignant. You know, why would someone leave an old carpet here? But it wasn't like that. The carpet belonged to the local homeless man. It was actually his bed. And Jimmy used to give this man money and food. And all he had to leave for Jimmy was his bed. Oh, we were so touched by that. And even for me at home, you know, if my dining room chairs were always breaking, my sons are big, Jimmy would fix them, or any painting jobs or gardening jobs. And everything Jimmy did, he did with the most beautiful smile.
You know, that's the fact that Jimmy smiled so much came out after his death. And, you know, as a dad, probably didn't even realise that. You know, sometimes you're with someone every day, all day, every day, and sometimes you miss those things. And yes, you know, known as the boy who sparkled, and he smiled. Lovely, lovely attitude, lovely disposition. Yeah, good dad.
And what impact did this have on you as individuals and as a family?
Changes completely. Absolutely, completely. Nothing's ever been the same again. I think nowadays everything I say, do, think, Jimmy's in there somewhere. So a huge adjustment. I suppose the thing is, at the beginning, you've no idea. You're in the middle of this media storm. You've no idea what's being perceived, what's going out there. I think we made headlines very quickly, and we didn't know why. But it was the things we were saying, and there was nothing planned. We're going to say X, Y, or Z or anything like that. Just something came across with the way we responded to that. I think there was. It's almost as though when something so traumatic happens, it takes time for it to sink in. And that's what it was with Jimmy. I think it probably took me a few years to fully appreciate that he was dead, as strange as that might sound. You know, we people we love are in our lives, and we might not be with them at the moment, but they're not very far away. They're in our hearts. And I think I felt that with Jimmy. I used to find that grief for me was an actual physical pain in my stomach. Feel like I was being folded in half, wound up in a vice, if you like. But gradually that went away, and each time it was like a little string being cut. Gradually that distancing from Jimmy. I knew it was coming. There was nothing I could do. Time does this sort of stuff. So yeah, a complete and utter change. We are still the people we were. I suppose you could almost look upon it as a book. We're the same book, but we just have a new cover now, and that's what drives us.
I think it was obviously for our family very, very difficult. Jimmy was such a part of all our family, as I said earlier, and so it's been a journey for them as well. And some still find it difficult, and some cope better than others. But I think what helped me cope was Barry, because we were very close, and we seemed to have the same thoughts after, which always helps, because in situations like this you often hear of parents thinking differently and ending up breaking up. Well, it didn't us, thank goodness. So I suppose that was my strength, and the support we got from so many people. We had local restaurants sending food round. We had people turning up with tea bags and sandwiches and things, and all this love that was shown to us actually helped us cope at that time.
You could liken it, we share in schools, is what we do nowadays. We try and liken the response to what happened to us to perhaps what we see in the world now, whether it's in Ukraine, whether it's in the Middle East. And forget the military for a moment, that humanitarian aid, that need within each one of us. Something awful has happened. What can I do? What can I do in my own small way? And we experience that in obviously a much smaller way. But people are saying, what can I do to help? And you know, without sounding too trite, it's the love we are capable of showing each other. So why do we wait? Why do we wait for the bad moments before we interact with each other with that sense of love, of care?
Despite everything that happened, you've shown forgiveness for your son's killer and even sympathy for his family. You know, a lot of people would feel that's a level of tolerance or kindness that's kind of beyond them. Why did you do things in that way? Why is forgiveness so important?
For me, I share and talk about forgiveness. After Jimmy was killed, as the weeks went on, I realised there was something missing from my life, and that was my smile. I wasn't smiling anymore, I was crying, and I didn't want to remember Jimmy with tears. I wanted to remember him with joy, and I realised that the only way I could do that was to forgive the person who killed Jimmy. And so I did forgive them, but I also wanted to get up in the mornings and see the sun shining and the flowers blossoming. I couldn't do it if I didn't forgive him. So in a way we had to lead this new life, as Barry said, this new cover, and the only way I could do it was by forgiving the person. But what it doesn't mean is it doesn't matter, because it does matter what happened to Jimmy, and I don't want to be Jake Farrell's best friend, but I do have this need to lead my life in the way that I am now, and so I do forgive him, and I'll always use the words wherever I go, whoever I'm talking to: forgiveness, peace and hope. And it's helped me immensely. I think it's helped the fact that Barry and I often, although we talk about forgiveness slightly different, the fact that we both are forgiving has helped us as a couple as well.
Yeah, there was certainly a degree of empathy for the perpetrator's parents, as if we'd had a knock on our door to say that one of our children had done some sort of thing similar. Would not stop loving our child in any way, but had a sense of empathy for the parents themselves. I don't think that was reciprocated, but I think when it comes to forgiveness, at its basic level, it's something we do for ourselves. It took me a long time to get to the level now where I will actually say, Jake, I forgive you. For the first few years, I could not mention his name. My body wouldn't let me mouth the word Jake. So it's a long process, a very slow process, but a gradual transformation. But in the end, it's something we do for ourselves. And I think, for people a bit baffled perhaps by forgiveness, I would have been probably the same retributive in my response had this not happened to me, and it did, and this was a different response. But that sense of forgiveness being the best form of self-interest is how Bishop Desmond Tutu says it. And I think if we look upon it as something primarily what we do for ourselves, it enables us to cope. It's enabled us to cope. It's enabled us to do what we do now. And it doesn't mean to say when we get hurt, and everybody gets hurt in life to various degrees or other, doesn't mean to say what you did, what you said, doesn't matter. Of course it matters. But it's just whether it goes on then to destroy you, to keep reliving that, and it goes on and on. And I don't doubt that probably would have destroyed me. If I had gone down this line of hate and retribution and the rest of it, destroyed the relationship I had with Margaret, and untold damage to the rest of our children. So it's about self-interest. And I'd like to encourage people to look upon it from that angle. This is not about the perpetrator. This is about the people who have been victims, if you like, or family of victims, a way of managing pain that comes their way in life. We speak about this in schools. We try and give them the tools to perhaps manage the hard parts, the dark parts of life.
Your son's killer was released in 2023 on licence, but then was investigated for making drill music that seemed to reference the killing. How did you feel when you heard about that?
I think when we first heard about it, obviously we were inundated with the press coming round. Literally, the moment it came out in the newspaper, so at first we didn't really have time to think about it. Yes, we said it was terrible, but it was only after the press died down that we really took it in. And I think he's been incredibly unkind, incredibly cruel to be doing the music that he's doing. But I think the music needs to be looked at anyway, because the words in this kind of music is inciting violence. It's inciting people to use knives, to use drugs. Well, this can't be right. And it has been a shock to us. And obviously, I know we're about 2 weeks or a week and a half down the line now. And the more I think about it, the more I think it's just appalling that this is allowed to be played and sung. And in Jake Farry's case, I think, as I said earlier, it's incredibly cruel to have even thought to use the words he's used, because he says it's not about Jimmy, but it clearly is.
I'd never even heard the term drill music. I didn't know. I'd heard of rap music, that sort of stuff, so it's not something I listened to. So I was introduced, if you like, to the world of drill music. I think the messages that it's getting across are very damaging. I think for us, our aim is to try and make our streets safer for everybody, including all our young people. And I feel this is counterproductive to it. You're giving out a message and people live in reflected glory of that sort of music, of being powerful, of having power, of hurting people. And that's counterproductive. And I think if we look at what's happening on the streets of London at the moment, the young people, a couple of weeks ago, a 14-year-old was killed. The young people that are being sucked into violence, Margaret said drugs, and there's gangs and all sorts of things as well. I believe it's connected to that. I think that sort of output of music, those sort of lyrics, encourage that. The person who killed Jimmy had actually made a song himself and put it on YouTube a couple of weeks before he killed Jimmy, saying he wanted to hurt someone. So I think the influence that this has on our society, especially our young people, is something I haven't been aware of myself. I'm very aware of it now. And it's given, if you like, a new impetus for us about what else needs to be looked at. Our sole purpose, I think, is to try and get people thinking differently about these issues. If we can get people thinking differently about the issues of damage being done by this drill music, by these words of hate, of confrontation, of anger, and if we can shine a light on that, and maybe, just maybe, that can be toned down a bit.
I think one of the things that really worried me when this all came out in the press was we were giving him a platform, and we were giving him almost this celebrity status. That was my fear. Now, it could still happen, because he's been in the news so much, with his picture, with his mask on and everything. And I don't want that to happen, because I think that will be really detrimental to my family. but we'll have to wait and see. He has gone back into prison, but it's not quite as simple, I think, as everyone thinks. He's gone in on 28-day recall, and he has to go back to parole in 28 days, and then they'll decide whether he stays in or not. So we are at this moment don't really know what's happening, but we'll have to wait and see. But if he needs to be back in prison, that's where he should be. But do you know what? So many people say to me, so good he's back in prison. I don't think that. I wanted him to come out of prison in 2023 and be the kind of person that changed his life and was leading a good life. But he clearly wasn't, and that saddens me. So I'm not pleased. I just wished he'd done what I'd hoped he'd do, and he didn't. It's a bit sad.
I think prison, in the end, it's not when someone comes out, it's what comes out. Is it the same violent, angry person that went in? Then what was the point? Jake has been in prison, he served over 15 years in prison. Nothing has changed. What was the point? Where's all the money spent on that? What changes it made? So I think there's the deeper issues there to really look at. The whole issue, crime, punishment.
So young people are seeing violence not just in music, also computer games, and then just in real life as well, machetes, knives. I mean, what can we do to tackle that?
I think first and foremost that the police are there to do a job. There is a job there, and I think perhaps for the families affected, that for them just a small crumb of comfort can be the truth of what has actually happened, and then for perhaps perpetrators to face consequences of their actions. I think as individuals, what can we do? Don't expect the threat of ever harsher punishment to make this change. The minimum tariffs were changed a few years after Jimmy was killed, and for the same circumstances now, the minimum tariff has been increased by 10 years. But it doesn't change the thing. It's worse now than what it was. So don't expect this call for ever harsher punishment, and I understand where it comes from, but don't expect that to change things. I think perhaps let the police do their job is the first and foremost. But also, people with information, we hear this term wall of silence. People don't grasp, people don't tell stories. These don't tell on other people. These are lives that are lost. Can we change that thinking? Can we change that thinking? Forget the wall of silence. There are ways of giving information. That can all help. Small ways. Doing things like banning machetes is pointless. It's almost tokenism. You're going to ban the sale of that knife or that particular product. Go to the kitchen drawer. You know, it's almost as though if we ban a particular product, the problem will go away. No, it won't. You know, so I think we need some perhaps grown-up responses to some of this, especially from our political leaders. You know, jump on the bandwagon. I think there was a young man done an awful killing. 3 young girls in trial recently, was given a minimum 52 years in prison. And suddenly you've got a politician saying that's not long enough. We've got to come away from all this tokenism. Let's get serious about these sort of things. There is no easy solution whatsoever, but just some of those things, just look at it a bit differently. Stop trying to find easy answers.
I think for me, I don't have the answers, and if I did have the answers, wouldn't it be fabulous? But I do think we need to get to our children a little bit younger, because quite often when people think about you going in schools, it's secondary schools and they're 14, 15, it's too late. For me, I like to go into primary schools and talk to the children, and I share with them about what happened to Jimmy, and I share about 2 boys who lived in the same area, one very kind, one very unkind. I talk about bullying. I also ask them if they're brave enough to put their hands up if they have bullied. I said, I'm not going to tell you off, I just want to know. And then when they put their hand up, and many do, I say, could I ask you now to think about not doing that? And they're all saying yes. You've got them in the palm of your hand. This is the time we need to talk about forgiveness, peace and hope. And for the young people to go out and be the change makers. Honestly, when you see them in the primary schools, they'll do anything for you. That's where we need to capture them. And then things will start to change. And I also believe that it's the young people themselves that can bring the change by using their voices.
I know as well as the school visits, you've done some prison visits. I mean, what did you take away and learn from those?
Again, don't want to sound too trite, but our prisons are not so much full of bad people, but they're full of people who made some terrible decisions. And you could even put our son's killer in that category. Our first visit was to a young men's prison, if you like, a young offenders prison, and we didn't know what to do. We were apprehensive, we were scared. We was asked if we could go in and just meet some of these young people, and you're expecting to see versions of the person who killed your son, but we just saw versions of ordinary people, like our own sons are ordinary people. It was a huge learning curve, why some people do what they do. I remember a particular visit to another prison. This is full of young men up to the age of 25, all on life sentences, most for murder. And one young lad put his hand up. He said, I did to somebody what Jake did to your son. I killed someone. So I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for what I did. I write letters to the family to tell them how sorry I am. I can't send the letter. So write a letter and send it to us. Nothing in it for him, no time off. He just wanted to share about his life. But this was a huge learning curve of why some people do what they do. And I think of a child being born today, and it will be happening. Forget not love from the day that child's born, not wanted from the day that child's born. A child that never grows up, understand anger, violence, aggression, neglect, that's all they know. They commit these crimes and we're so surprised. So I think that's just that huge learning curve. It's almost as though some people don't realise what they're doing. They almost don't know what you're actually doing until it's too late.
You mentioned about good things coming out of this, and one of those is the Mizen Foundation. Could you talk to us about the mission and how it will achieve that?
Well, I think our mission really is to promote the good in young people. The charity is our life now. It's what we do. It's what some of our family do as well. And we have different parts to it. We have our Talks for Change, which are our school visits. We have a Sparkle Award, which is given out to a young person in year 6 or 11 who has sparkled in the way that Jimmy did. Nothing complicated, just an award for someone who was actually really nice and has been quite kind in their school. And we also do a rugby tournament every year between various schools. All are going well. The Talks for Change, actually, we travel the country speaking in schools, and it's going really well. And it's just encouraging young people to be the change makers and the peacemakers, but with the clear message of forgiveness, peace and hope. And I explained to them about forgiveness, peace and hope. Forgiveness, because if we all forgave that little bit more, wouldn't this be a better world? And peace. Don't we all want to live in safer, more peaceful communities? I know I do. And hope. And I always say I have hope in my heart for a better tomorrow for each and every one of our beautiful young people. So that's kind of the 3 strands, but it keeps us incredibly busy. I mean, we don't get in touch with the schools, they get in touch with us. And next week we're in 2 schools, this week we're in a school, so it's just constant. But it's wonderful as well. And we have seen some of our young people change. We get lovely messages from the schools telling us, you know, when you were talking in the hall, we were watching some of our students, the ones that we find the most difficult, and they were so listening to what you were saying. So lots of good things come back to us. But we are going to continue, come what may, because on the day that Jimmy died, I promised him that I would dedicate my life to working for peace. So whatever happens, we're just going to constantly do this work because our young people are so precious.
We also talk to our adult groups, various kinds. But I think the message underneath all of this, and this is a message for everybody perhaps who's tuning into what we're doing now, if you want it different, if you want to live in more peaceful, compassionate societies, communities, families, whatever it may be, what are you going to do? You know, the change, people have said this down the centuries, the change starts at each one of us, and indeed it does. If I want to see an improvement, what am I prepared to do? And if we could do nothing more than just understand why some people do what they do, not to excuse it, but this is what happens, and consequences of actions are there, to say, well, what more can we do? Understand that's what happens. But also take into account those young people, the one I've just spoken about, that are growing up, going down this path. There are young children in our schools right now going down the same path. What are we doing for them? We can't just let it go. Can't just say, just tell people off or whatever it is. No need for any huge sort of angry response to that. Just understand that, and let's get in there early. You know, there's no point waiting until someone's 18, 19, 20 years of age. What's going on with their 5, 6, 7?
We also do lots of fundraising in the charity. You know, we think it's important that we bring in some money ourselves. So we do a Jumpers for Jimmy at Christmas where we get young people in schools to wear jumpers and pay a few pennies. We have a big walk in the summer called Walking for Jimmy. That's across all the bridges of London. And we have an annual Jimmy's Day at Millwall Football Club where they remember Jimmy and do a big collection for us. And so there's lots of good things going on, and schools will fundraise for us as well. And other people will say, I've just raised £200-300 from you. So all that goes on, because as much as what the message we're giving out in some ways is quite sad, in amongst all we do, there's fun as well. And that is really important, because for us, we still need to be smiling all the time as well.
Yeah, there has to be hope, doesn't there? I think, and again, this is not to criticise, I understand, but there have been people who have lost people in the way we have lost our Jimmy, and they can still be very angry, very hateful, and I understand where that comes from. But sometimes then we want a different message. You know, we were not predictable. What we said at the beginning wasn't contrived by us, it just happened. But it was a different message coming out there. And there's a different message now. It's one of hope. It's one of hope. The Pope calls for the people around the world to be pilgrims of hope. We can all do that. You know, there's got to be a good message. Don't want people seeing me or Margaret, or it's Barry and Margaret, I'm going to be crying again. Don't feel sorry for us. You know, perhaps look upon things differently. Listen to what we say, and if it makes difference, then please follow that. But there has to be these voices of optimistic voices. Otherwise, there's just so much doom and gloom. And I think that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in the end. We expect it to be bad, it'll be bad. Expect it to be good, and it might just be good.
Yeah, I hate it when I think I'm going anywhere and we're going to talk and everyone's going to end up crying, because that's not not what we want. And we even say to the young people, please don't feel sorry for us. That's not why we're here. We're here to bring change, because otherwise everyone starts crying. Yeah.
So the final thing I wanted to ask you both is what role faith has played in you getting through all of this.
Faith for me has been absolutely crucial to how I cope with the loss of Jimmy. In those early days, just because we had a faith didn't mean to say it was easy. The pain was unbearable. But, you know, Barry and I would go to bed at night, and we'd get into bed, we'd be holding each other tight, we'd be crying desperately for our lovely son, but we'd be praying and praying and praying as well. And those prayers at the time, it sustained us, allowed us to get up, face what we had to face, because there was so much in the early days. You know, when these things happen to someone, it's like a jigsaw puzzle, and the police have to put all the bits together, so there's all these things going on. So our prayers really helped us, and they've continued to help us. My faith, my Catholic faith, has been the epitome of everything I do, and I thank God that I've been given the chance to be part of his family, if you like. So yeah, no, but that's not just when we lost Jimmy. There's lots of things happen in life. We have a daughter with a learning disability. Samantha has Down syndrome, which is nothing, but at the time when she was born, I didn't understand it. And I remember praying to Our Lady, you know, to give me guidance. And we managed to get through that time. And yeah, it's just, for me, faith is everything. And I'm thankful in a way that Barry also thinks the same, because it means we can pray together, because it helps. You know, even if we're going to go and give a talk, we might say a few prayers beforehand and pray that God gives us the right words. So far he has, but but no, it's really, really, my life is my faith.
I think at the time I was very conscious of one thing, and it was about faith. And I didn't speak about Christian faith, I didn't speak about Catholic denomination, anything at all like that. I just tried to, because there'd be people there of other faiths, of no faith. And I don't almost wanted them to be excluded from this. But I was just trying to appeal that if you believe there is more than what we see in life, then maybe that's the way to go. You know, do you believe this is all there is, or is there something more? And try to get that across. Yeah, it's, I don't know, it carries me through. I'm grateful that I have a faith. I share the faith with my wife, as Margaret has just said. And we thank God for each other. And we pray for the strength to carry on doing what we're doing for as long as we can.
Barry and Margaret Mizen, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you.